Well, I'll tell you here and now, lad, that nothing was not the correct information. Because we're having your stinking hooligan guts for garters. Right?
Yes, sir.
This is a paid request from my old friend CIA Dave, and I have to say, after stuff like the Coca-Cola Kid and the Adventures of Faustus Bidgood, this might be his most normal film request. Well, normal by my standards. It's a simple tale of what went on in British juvenile correctional facilities in the 1970s. And how fitting that this film is called SCUM.
You're on our turf, scum fuck.
Thank you, Goose. Actually, the mention of films like Deadbeat at Dawn and The Warriors are perfect for this film because those two films illustrate what it's like to be on the streets in a youth gang. This is what it's like to be in lockup, at least in 1970s UK, which was basically the birthplace of punk rock and counterculture, which, at the time, was some real rough and tumble shit. We mainly follow the exploits of Carlin, played by Ray Winstone, who starts out as relatively quiet and shy new meat that gets kicked around and eventually comes to the character arc of Daddy, becoming not too far off from the violent youths attacking him in the beginning. I had only just seen SCUM for the first time, and I have to say right off the bat, this is my kind of movie. It's incredibly unforgiving and sleazy, but in a different way from the true crime or street vigilante fare that I tend to go for.
Back, Ross! I said, get back, shithead.
The first thing that surprised me, and in a really good way, was the complete lack of soundtrack. Director Alan Clark really wanted this to feel gritty and real, and the lack of any score telling you how you should be feeling really adds to the raw nature of the film. Though I suppose if you're a real twisted fuck like me, you can always just add your own music to make the scene even more disturbing or downright hilarious. What we have in SCUM is a look into the correctional system as a whole, the unforgiving nature of both the inmates and the guards. While this poor kid is getting gang raped in a greenhouse, one of the guards watches gleefully and then proceeds to make fun of the guy after, pretending as if he didn't see anything and tells him to get back to work. It isn't exactly hard to predict what happens after that. The guards are not your friends. They hate being there just as much as you do. And in the case of Juvie, at least in the realm of this film, they're serving their own sentences. So what the fuck do they really care? Besides Ray Winstone's brutally believable character arc as Carlin, who I'll be getting to in more detail, one of the main standouts is Mick Ford's portrayal of the rather rambunctious Archer. He seems to be playing the correctional system for simply shits and gigs. Something that this movie really reminded me of was that old HBO show Oz, and no, not for the obvious man rape factor, but for the unique career criminals in that show that over time have built their own personalities and reputations on the inside and will likely never see the outside world again because they seem to prefer being in jail. Archer is that. He's in Borstal prison for a fairly minor crime and could easily just serve out a reasonable sentence and be free, but he keeps coming up with little reasons to piss the system off, like refusing to wear the shoes provided because they're made of leather, him supposedly being a vegetarian, being against his moral code. He claims that he wants to become a Muslim, and even has the audacity to demand more books for the prison library because the ones provided don't stimulate him enough on an intellectual level. Now, violent prisoners and rapists are one thing. I can only imagine what it's like for the guards and the wardens to deal with that shit. But I'm guessing there the end game is the old billy club and getting locked into solitary confinement for a little while. But when it comes to someone like Archer, I mean, he's not being physical, he's not actually hurting anyone, he's just being fucking annoying, and seemingly just so he can not only stay in prison, but just be a damn nuisance on purpose. Now on to what I believe is the highlight of the film, and that is Ray Winstone's portrayal of Carlin. And if we're looking at this film in a traditional sense, I guess you could consider him to be the main character?
I give the orders. Right? Yeah. You'll get your perks, but I'm the daddy. Right!
Carlin arrives at Barstool ready to keep his head down, serve his time, and not get involved with anything. Well, tough shit, pal. He's very quickly targeted by the jail's main alpha and his goons, or as is referred to in this film, the daddy. He tries to explain away his injuries as accidents and thinks if he keeps his mouth shut long enough, it'll pass. But as time goes on, Carlin begins to develop his own mean streak, gain his own followers, and earns his own rank as the jail daddy. He becomes cold and absolutely ruthless, always standing up for himself and never showing fear. It's a fantastic and tragically portrayed character arc from Winstone. Also, for those of you not familiar with Ray Winstone, that's goddamn Mr. French from The Departed. He had amazing chemistry with Jack Nicholson and was just as fucking ruthless. He was also Beowulf! Remember that CG one from the early 2000s? No? I dug it. Dude's got a great voice. SCUM was directed by Alan Clark, who was no stranger to rough and sleazy cinema, often dealing in street crime or general human trash, like Made in Britain, which was Tim Roth's first role, where he plays a fucking violent skinhead. And here's where things get a little weird. There's a version of SCUM that was screened in 1991 on the BBC that was actually shot in 1977 that was initially banned by the BBC that forced Clark to film this version of SCUM, which is a pretty much shot-for-shot remake in 1979. And then finally, 15 years later in 1991, they released the 77 version. That is fuck. And this one does not go without its own controversy. SCUM 79 made it onto the infamous Video Nasties, and why shouldn't it? It's mean, and it's nasty. The 2010 Canadian film Dog Pound is heavily inspired by SCUM, which I'll need to see because I really hope it features lines like, "Hey, I'm the daddy now, bud." SCUM is a film, though maybe not the first, but definitely one of the main influences for grimy, sleazy, and very true-to-life prison-related shows and films like Oz, American History X, and Women's Prison Massacre. Yeah, sure. Why not?